And hello, I'm Alicia. I'll be presenting Chapter 9 in this video. Chapter 9 is called God and the Limbic System, and in it we're introduced to a device called the transcranial magnetic stimulator, which is this big device positioned onto the head that basically just uses magnets to activate any spot on your brain it's exposed to. So for example, if you were blind since birth, it's possible that the magnetic stimulator could turn on your visual cortex temporarily, or you could place it over a few different spots to feel really, really, really good. One woman in the book describes it as 1,000 orgasms wrapped up into one instant when the experiment was done on her. Canadian Dr. Michael Persinger studied this, but how stimulating the temporal lobes seemed to produce deeply religious experiences for people. This in part comes from the knowledge that epileptic seizures in the temporal lobes, especially the left one, often leaves patients extremely preoccupied with religion and philosophy in their life, outside of having the seizure. Neurologists often call this temporal lobe personality. These patients tend to be very serious people and actually be rather egocentric and argumentative. Many experience what's called hypographia, where they record events and symbols in extreme detail inside, say, a diary. Dr. Ramachandran speaks to one such patient named Paul, who actually handed him this giant manuscript full of, complex symbols and stuff. Paul has had such seizures since he was 8 years old, and we find out that Paul is, along with being, deeply religious, also has extremely detailed flashbacks and a very good mnemonic memory, a trait shared with other patients like him too. When asked to describe the spiritual high that comes with the seizures, Paul says, "Well, it's not easy, doctor. It's like trying to explain the rapture of sex to a child who has not yet reached puberty." This feeling of what might best be called transcendence is not specific towards any one religion, and indeed the experience tends to be interpreted according to the individual's own spiritual perspective. Ramachandran spends a decent part of this chapter giving the reader some background into evolutionary psychology, which, when this book was written in the 90s, was a relatively new field. He ties this into the chapter with the hypothesis that the God module, or specialized neural circuitry for religious experience, has evolved to be part of our brain. He also considers other hypotheses, such as that circuits between vision, hearing, and the amygdala are being activated and reinforced, giving deep significance to everyday objects and events. The chapter goes on to explain the role of the limbic system, where galvanic skin response tests tried on a couple of these patients actually showed they had a powerful response to religious words and images, rather than the strong responses going towards the normal stimuli of sex and violence. However, in my research outside of the book, I found that with more recent information, it points to other parts of the brain also being involved in these feelings of transcendence. M. Castillo, editor of the American Journal of Radiology, explains in a March 2011 editorial how fMRI scans of Buddhist monks and Catholic nuns during meditation/prayer both showed activation in prefrontal, cingulated cortex, parietal lobes, and in some subcortical areas, so not just the temporal lobes or even the limbic system. In another study, subjects were scanned using positron emission tomography imaging while praying and reciting Psalm 23, which is, if you're not familiar with the verse, is "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want," yada yada. They all had significantly increased blood flow to the right dorsolateral prefrontal cortex. That's a mouthful. And not in the areas discussed by Ramachandran. I also looked a bit further into Persinger's God helmet, which really does looks like a ski helmet or something. And unfortunately, Castillo and other sources explained that Persinger's results weren't actually all that definitive. The one recreation of the experience by some Swedish researchers wasn't successful, and in fact, their control group members actually had deep religious experiences too. Also, certain aspects of his theory and methodology have been criticized, such as the magnetic fields he used being too weak and the lack of it being a double-blind study. It was just a single blind. And also the fact that his theorizing His theory, which the project was based on, was also critiqued as well, such as his focus on the right temporal lobe, when all of the knowledge we had about it was saying the left temporal lobe, and just stuff like that. So anyway, I'll see you on the presentation on Thursday, unless you're watching this video, after we present in class. Thank you for listening to us, and I hope you find this book interesting.
Hello, my name is Geoffrey Matheson. I'm going to be presenting today on the 10th chapter in Ramachandran's book, Phantoms in the Brain, which is about laughter. It's about things other than laughter, but I'm going to be focusing on the laughter and the explain where laughter comes from and why we do it. In the text, Ramachandran posits that the source of laughter is a physiological evolution to convey a lack of threat of a given situation. So for instance, something happens, it could be threatening, it looks like it's going to be threatening, and then it's not threatening. Okay, so the main purpose of laughter in this theory is to alert individuals in a social group that whatever has happened is not threatening. For example, suppose that you and 20 of your closest friends are prehistoric people going out hunting mammoths, or a mammoth, depending on the season of climate changes. It sees you coming at it, it doesn't want to die, so it decides to charge at you and trample you. About 30 feet away from you, it trips on a banana peel. Suddenly it's no longer a threat, and in this theory, you would start to laugh and face plants into the ground. Or whoever's in front would see this happen, would laugh, whoever's around him would pick up on the laughter as a sort of contagious communicative, we'll call it a meme, not the picture thing, mind you, but like an actual viral thought. So you're hunting the mammoth, and it trips and falls. You laugh at it because it is no longer a threat. The threat has been diffused, eliminated. You go up and you kill it like normal, you drag it back, and you have food. The problem with this theory is that laughter requires a certain level of arousal. If you're not excited enough, say you're bored or you're tired, things won't trigger a laughter response as easily. At the other end of the spectrum, if things are too intense, say the mammoth trips and falls and squishes a guy, it's not funny because the guy is dead, and that's a serious issue.
Unless you're a terrible person. Then you'll think it's funny anyway.
Unless you're a terrible person, you think it's funny. Like the guy who laughed at his mother's funeral. Although laughter can be a good coping mechanism. Laughter can be a good coping mechanism because of, or maybe not because of, but it supports this theory that something is not nearly as big a threat as it seems to be. Mm-hmm. There was the implication of threat, but you've realized that what could have been a threat is actually trivial, and therefore not threatening. So it has been adapted as a means of dealing with intense situations to relieve stress or fear or anxiety. Like, for instance, so you're at a work party, you're mingling with everybody, rubbing elbows with your boss and your boss's boss and your boss's boss's boss, and you really, really want to make a good impression, but somebody bumps into you, you spill your cocktail on yourself, and now you're soaking wet. In a social setting, trying to impress people, this would not be a good thing, but you can laugh and turn it into sort of a joke thing. Oh my god, it's no big deal, everything's okay, please don't fire me. Implying with the laughter that this is a trivial occurrence and that it's not a big deal, and reduce the tension. From a physiological perspective, as you probably have noticed, once somebody starts laughing, the people around them start laughing. Sometimes you don't know why. Maybe you're laughing at them, maybe you're laughing at the same thing they're laughing at, maybe you walk in on a bunch of people laughing and you just can't help yourself but laugh. Part of the reason for this could be that as you may have noticed, probably have noticed, laughter tends to be contagious. You see somebody laughing, you will start laughing as well. A reason for this could be as a swift means of communication. Taking the mammoth example, the person in the front of the hunting party sees this and starts laughing at the mammoth, which is now, tusks deep in the dirt, can't get up and fight anymore. So he starts laughing, and everybody else who's maybe hiding behind rocks and trees hears him laughing, and this relays the information that there isn't a threat, whatever happened is okay. And it's contagious, so that in a large group of people, the information gets transferred quickly throughout the group. Okay. So as you may have noticed, laughter tends to be a pleasurable experience. This reinforces it, positive reinforcement loop. Not a loop. Well, I guess if you keep laughing, you can keep laughing. There was an incident somewhere, I don't remember where exactly, but there was a group of people there was a laughter epidemic, and it was in a school, and the students started laughing, and the teachers started laughing, and for 6 months they couldn't stop laughing. As far as I know, nobody died, so that's good. Interesting trivia, but not sourced, so, So laughter is a pleasurable experience, which creates positive reinforcement, which encourages the repetition of that action, which keeps it going strong in the evolutionary psyche of people. The other research indicates that it is also used as a social bonding activity. That at one point, back in a primate tree, or at some point when the humans split off from the primate tree, it's possible that it probably might also have gone with a lack of, when we lost all of our hair as a species. Most primates will use the act of grooming each other, picking through their hair for fleas and things, as a social bonding activity. So instead of grooming each other, human beings evolved laughter as a means of bonding social groups. And it works in pair bonding or in small group bonding, like in mates, in families, in large tribes. So that works. Classrooms too, small groups, family unit. But laughter stimulates pleasure in the brain, which reinforces the act of laughing. And in a group setting, laughing with people, those connections will strengthen or potentiate, and you will have a group of people that is more likely to cohere. It'll increase group cohesion. Also, and this includes is going into humor as well. It's a means of sharing information, not just, oh, this isn't a threat, but the specific things that people find funny. Like, for instance, I think this is funny, you think this is funny, we both think this is funny, we both agree that that is totally not even remotely cool, so we're not going to go there. And just laughing at things with people can share that information and build those connections and improve group cohesion and understanding of people. And that can work with very large groups of people. So those are theories on laughter as a physiological response. Humor is an associated subgroup. Laughter and humor are very often linked together because, so now in days where we don't have charging mammoths face planting in the dirt, we have other things to laugh at that are life and death. Okay, so humor. Some of the basic fundamental theories on humor harken back to the same sort of threat diffusion thing. So something happens, there's a build-up, and then there's an event where something else is revealed, and what you thought it was going to happen turns out to not be what is going to happen. So this kind of goes off into joke theory a little bit, but it's a good way to explain humor because humor is typically explained through jokes. Although not all humor is limited to jokes. There's a couple of different varieties of humor. Slapstick, for instance, doesn't use jokes so much as physical comedy. Slapstick is a good example of the bridging between the threat diffusion theory of laughter and the congruence and incongruence juxtaposition theory of humor, because slapstick takes physicality, often injury, to the comedian or whoever, the victim perhaps, depending on the situation. And so what it does, you have the setup where the victim or comedian, something happens to them and they appear to get injured, and your first reaction is, oh my god, is that person okay? Followed by the revelation that they are in fact fine, that they are not injured. And so the humor and the laughter come from the realization that they are okay, that they are in no harm. Gender differences. Humor probably evolved after language. The more jokes would have to have evolved after language, because jokes rely on linguistic structure, complex symbols, the words. The sounds we make as words are attached to the recognition of ideas, social intellectual constructs, and then the joke is taking those and lining them up in such a way that there's a dissonance and resolution, and then everything's funny. So for instance, here's a joke. Did you hear about the guy who got the entire left side of his body amputated? It's okay, he's all right now. That joke is funny because all right, in the sense that everything is okay, versus all right in the sense that there is nothing left of him. Or there's nothing on his left. There's nothing left of him. And some jokes presuppose incongruency with reality, where there's a setup. For instance, a horse walks into a bar and the bartender says, "Why the long face?" Well, a horse wouldn't normally walk into a bar, you tie him up outside. But for the sake of the joke, we allow for so we allow some bending of reality to set up for the dissonance, which would be absolute complete nonsense. No dissonance, just flat out nonsense without allowing for that. So there are some theories. There's some other theories on where humor comes from. There are sometimes humor can be used to express superiority. For instance, there's a large group of jokes that today are mostly deemed inappropriate, racist, that sort of thing. Blonde jokes, for example, are probably the tamest set of those. Two blondes walk into a bar, you'd think one of them would have seen it. It can also be used as an indirect expression of anger, like, I am really angry at you, and I want you to know it, but it will disrupt social cohesion if I were actually angry at you, so we're just going to pretend to be angry, and that's going to stand in for the being angry, and everything will be okay. And another one is indirect expression of sexual feelings, which is the same as anger, but less violent, hopefully, depending. I don't know, I'm not judging. Also, desire for approval or diverting attention from a misdeed, sort of saving face. It also, of course, enhances group cohesiveness, or for settling differences in a positive manner, like with the anger thing. I'm angry at you, but we gotta be okay about it, so. Okay. So those are just some of the theories presented both by Ramachandran and by other research that I have done. I could distribute in class if there is interest.
Cool.
So yes, that's all I have. Thank you for watching, and I hope it was educational. Damn it, Jim, I'm a doctor, not a cultural anthropologist.
We're still on Phantoms in the Brain by Dr. Ramachandran, in case you forgot.
In the text, Ramachandran fidgets a lot with his face, but not the text. Sorry. Meme means viral thought. The pictures with funny captions on them are nice, but they're not really what a meme is. Although technically they are. But anyway, I'm going on semantic arguments. You know where I'm going with this. Why am I explaining it to you? A problem with this example is that laughter, for the most part, requires a certain level of arousal or excitement to, not that kind of arousal. Although maybe that kind of arousal, if that's your thing. I mean, sex can be pretty funny, let's be honest. It's true.
Like 1,000 orgasms.
It's nobody's business who you love, where you love, what equipment you might use. Actually, that is somebody's business, but the point is...
It's the whole industry.
The whole industry. We should make an outtakes reel. That would be a good thing to put on the internet. Yay!
Yay!